Okay, so we're going to expand on the circuit a little bit. We're going to add a button to it. And the purpose of the button is going to be able to generate a random number here. Random color. If I push this button, you can see that it generates random colors. Although my camera saturates so fast, but it really is putting out a lot of different colors. So what happens is I push the button. It generates 3 random numbers, each between 0 and 255. And then it outputs or analog writes those 3 values to the tricolor LED. All right. So let me pause this and we'll go ahead and build it and we'll go from there. So give me a second. Okay, so to add this is super simple. We're going to need just a button and a couple of wires. And you're going to take this button. Notice it's oriented in such a way there's quite a distance from one side to the other, but these 2 wires, for example, are close together. I'm going to put these 2 that are close together and use them to span across the IC gap. Okay, so my 2 close together wires are on this side and on this side of the IC gap. Now I'm going to take one of these wires and I'm going to plug it into the same column. Okay, and I'm going to hook this up to ground. And this other one, I'm going to span it across to the board, and I'm going to hook it into pin. Actually, 2, 3. I'm going to hook it into pin 4 because I'm going to have ultimately a couple more buttons here. So we're going to have a little space to play. All right. So now let's take our code we were working on and let's add a few variables and functions to it. So to start with, we're going to have another global. We're going to make it I'll call it the mix button. And I'm going to equal it to pin 4. All right. And I'll come back and comment it in a moment. The next thing we have to do, oops, I've already have this example here. I meant to not have that on there. But this is what I did, all right, is I put mix button, and I want to set it to input. I want to be able to push this button and receive data, okay? So setting the mix button to input makes perfect sense. But you'll notice I don't have any power or ground, or I have ground, but I don't have any power going to it. I don't have any resistors or any other circuitry to it. So somehow I have to power this pin, okay? Well, it turns out the Arduino and most of these embedded controllers have a way of setting a pin to input as well as make it high, okay? So it's going to flood it with electrons. So if I ask it whether or not it's high or not by doing an analog read or digital read, it's going to say yes, it's high because it's flooded with electrons. Now if I push the button now, that's going to allow that pin to be connected to ground. So if the button is depressed, those electrons are not going to be in the pin, they're going to be in ground. So if I ask it whether or not it's high or not, it's going to say, well, no, it's low because it's hooked to ground. Okay? So to do that with a pin, you have to hook up what's called a pull-up resistor inside. It's a digital function. It's nothing you have to do physically. And that pull-up resistor pulls the pin up, makes it high. Okay? So that's going to set the pin to both high and to input. All right? The other thing we're going to do is we're going to need to be able to test this somehow first. So I'm actually going to go ahead and open up a serial port. All right. And we're going to open the serial port. And the other thing is my computer, when I open up a serial port, it tends to get a little bit bogged down. So I'm going to throw a little bit of a delay. If not, it errors sometimes. Things happen before the port's actually open. Okay, so now let's create a new function. We want to have a function that allows us to check the LED state. I'm sorry, check the button state. So I think I'll call it check button. Seems like a good enough name. I'm actually use plural because I think we're going to have more than one button before this is all done. So we're going to have check buttons. And this function simply wants to check whether or not this button is high or low. Okay? So to do that, we want to if the button is high, then do this. If not, do something else. So I'm going to start with just an if, because all we really need to know is if it's high. And in this particular case, we want to do a digital read. We just want to see high or low, yes or no. So we're going to go with digital read. And what do we want to digital read? Well, we want to digital read the state of, okay, I spelled that. It's mix button. Mix button. All right. We want to digital read the state of the mix button. Okay. So this function right here, we just made a call to digital read to find the state. Now what we want to do is we find out if it's low, because it's normally high. Okay. We've turned it on. We've used the input pull-up. It's normally high. So now when the button is depressed, it's going to go low. Okay? And from there, let's do something simple. Let's just do a serial.println. We'll say something plain like, I don't know, mix. Man, I'm having a hard time today. All right. Now, you are really slow, okay? In the digital world, things happen really fast. So if I were to leave it just like this, what would happen is while I'm in the process of pushing the button, it'll probably print out mix button is pressed 50 times. So what I want to do is I want to throw a little delay in there to give me a chance to actually get my finger pulled away from the button. And I'm going to put it on for a half a second, which is plenty of time. Okay? And now let's go ahead and call the mixed check buttons function. So we're going to call it, tidy my code a little bit, and let's see what happens here. Notice I've saved this as video3, which is the third one I'm setting in this unit. And we'll load it up. And let's check our serial monitor. And there you can see it. So every time I push the button, now I have to hold the button down, and every half second it would spit it out. Okay. Works perfect. All right. So now we have to use this our function here, our board, to generate a random color. All right. So to do that, we should set up the random number generator. Now, if you recall, the best way to do that is to make sure that it actually is random. We should seed it. All right. So I'm going to do that here. Let's seed random seed, and we're going to use A0. Okay, so we want to do an analog read of A0, and that is going to tune it into static and then randomize the number. All right, so let's see what we've got here. We've got check buttons. I think the next thing we want to do is, since we're going to use this check buttons to check more than one button, let's generate a whole new function for the sole purpose of generating the color. So I'm going to go ahead now and create another function, and I'll put it right here. And I think I'll call this random color. Okay. So let's make a variable. Let's call it, we'll do one of them first, we'll make sure it works. Let's do an integer variable. We'll call it, we'll do red random. I'll keep it abbreviated to that. And what we want to do is we want to make it equal to a random number between 0 and, in this case, we want to go all the way to 255, so that means we need to go 256. Okay? And that should give us our red random number. So let's go ahead and reproduce that. Actually, we'll go ahead and we'll actually display that one. We'll make sure it works, and then we'll pause it and build the rest. Okay? So the next thing we want to do is we want to then analog write to what? We want to analog write to, for example, our red LED pin. And what we want to analog write is the value that we generated from our random number. Awesome. Okay. We should be able to reproduce that just a couple of times. Let's just do it. We'll copy and paste it. And so we're going to have a green, and we're going to have a blue, and we want to go down here, and we want to analog write this, and we want to do it a couple of times. So we want the green LED to get the green random, and we want the blue LED to get the blue random. All right. And then what we should do is call random color not from loop, but probably it would be best to put it right here. Okay? So only when it gets the button depressed. So let's see what happens here. We'll load this up. Oh, I forgot a parentheses again. All right, I need to have two of those. Let's load this up again. And there you go. You can see that it's generating a random color. So let me pause this. We'll clean it up a little bit, and we'll wrap it up, and we'll move on to the next one. I'll see you in a second. Okay, you can see that I've finished off my code. I've fully commented it. And I'll be posting this in the modules for the class. And it works just great. So I will see you all again shortly with the next video.